All right, guys. As has been the case here lately, I'm pulling a last second fucking video out because this just happens to be the time where I happen to get curious and kind of peruse YouTube and shit. But I got to go to work very soon, so this is going to have to be a quick one.
Breaking news, everybody. A study was just published this past month in Nature Human Behavior that found that conservatives hate science. Can you believe it? This news comes as a huge shock to everyone who has spent the past several decades not being born yet. The researchers told the Associated Press that they hope that this finding helps kickstart their next project, determining the specific biomes where bears shit. Okay. Sorry, everyone. I've been wanting to make a video about the current Republican war on science, but every time I sit down to say anything about it, there are 1,000 new aspects to it. And to be honest, I really need another vacation because the good vibes have run out from the one I just took like 3 months ago. Anyway, I'll stop being mean about this study because it's not just about how conservatives hate science. It's not even just that they distrust science, even though that is the headline of the press release for this study. The researchers actually found several interesting and more depressing aspects to this conservative personality trait that we already knew about. For instance, we've known for decades that conservatives hate science that contradicts their worldview, which, yeah, is most of all of science. Conservatives are more likely to reject evolution, thanks to being taught from an early age that dinosaur bones were planted in the earth by Satan to trick us. They reject cosmology because they were taught that a magical ferryman made everything in the universe in 6 days, even though making days is literally one of the things he had to do. And they hate climatology because a bunch of oil companies paid Rush Limbaugh to tell them that everything is fine and the world is not getting warmer. And even if it is, it's not our fault. And even if it is our fault, it's actually good because don't you like going to the beach and sitting by the sea on warm days? Well, now the warm days extend well into October and the sea is coming to you. But this particular study showed that the Republican plan to politicize all of science has had even greater success than anyone thought, because conservatives don't even trust the science that does conform to their worldview. In a survey of nearly 8,000 Americans, conservatives distrusted every one of 35 different scientific professions they were asked about, including fields like industrial chemistry, because now, after decades of propaganda, they believe that all of science, even the fields that conservatives used to like, all of science is a leftist hobby, and that universities are havens of left-wing bias that are churning out these untrustworthy lib scientists. But wait, there's more bad news. The researchers attempted several interventions to see if they could get the conservatives to budge on their viewpoint. Like they would profile prominent conservative scientists or discoveries that are in line with conservative values. And nothing worked. The distrust is now so deeply ingrained in conservative sense of self that it's going to take a heroic effort to get them to do so much as admit that maybe there's some value to knowing what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. This is just the inevitable result of decades of special interest groups getting more and more money and using that money to buy more and more power, and then chiseling away at whoever is pointing out a reality that is inconvenient to that interest group. I've already mentioned big oil pushing propaganda about climate change, but there's also the gun lobby. Back in the 1990s, CDC-funded research showed that keeping a gun in the home increases a person's odds of being murdered by a close friend or family member. So the National Rifle Association responded by lobbying to completely eliminate the CDC department that funded that study. That led to the Dickey Amendment in 1996, which forbade the CDC from funding any research on the dangers of guns, which lasted for more than 20 years. And now, when Americans talk about the recent mass shooting, we have to clarify which one we're talking about. We literally have mass shootings at our memorials for mass shootings. It's Not great. As Catherine J. Wu wrote in The Atlantic back in February, that Republican-backed legislation didn't just slow down research during those 2 decades. The impact was much, much worse because for 20 plus years, scientists were dissuaded from going into that field of research due to knowing that they would forever struggle to find any funding. People didn't want to be anywhere near the topic because any association with it could result in the loss of funding, even for research that wasn't directly related to firearms. And so when the amendment was finally lifted and funding began again in 2020, there was no one ready to restart that research. To make matters worse, these days, Trump isn't simply demanding that funding be revoked for those currently studying the topics that the special interest groups that control this administration are worried about, but he is actively disappearing research that's already been published. US attorneys are sending letters to journal editors demanding to know if they accept competing viewpoints. And I'm not talking about social science journals here or even those focused on sex and sexuality. I'm talking about CHEST, the official publication of the American College of Chest Physicians, who study things like, lung cancer. Sorry, chest physicians, but now you have to give equal time to my alternative theory that asthma is actually a psychosomatic illness children invent to get out of running laps in gym class. The even worse news is that there's a trove of research that isn't being protected by random journal editors. The US government funds and also hosts a lot of studies on their own websites in order to ensure that those studies remain freely available, like this study that found that immigrants commit far fewer felonies than US citizens, and undocumented immigrants especially. Probably because, they're undocumented and they would very much like to stay here.
Not only has this study been replicated numerous times, and it's basically common sense to the entire fucking world at this point, but it goes to show what she's talking about and how conservatives are like incapable of acknowledging science. They just cherry pick beliefs that whatever suits them at the time, which means none of their views are legitimate. None of them have any sort of scientific backing. None of them use evidence to confirm them or legitimize them. Which begs the question, why would anyone take a conservative seriously on anything?
But if you try to view that study on the Department of Justice's website today, you can't, nor can you read the helpful summary of it without using the Wayback Machine. If you try to visit the link where it was once hosted, you just get this notice reading, the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs is currently reviewing its websites and materials in accordance with recent executive orders and related guidance. During this review, some pages and publications will be unavailable. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. This, of course, comes directly beneath a large banner with the NIJ's slogan on it, advancing justice through science. That's just one of the many studies that people are beginning to realize have been conveniently memory holed from official government websites, forcing people to find them elsewhere or using archive.org. Blue Sky user @rtoller found examples of disappeared studies about countering violent extremism, violence in high schools, human trafficking, and community-based crime prevention. Unfortunately, we can expect the state of research in every field under attack by the Trump administration to resemble that of gun control following the Dickey Amendment, but much, much worse. This Trump administration, we're going to see the same result in every area that special interests have politicized. Gun control, climate change, birth control, abortion, women's health in general, HIV, AIDS, and of course, transgender care, just to name a few. If you are in college learning to research any of those things, don't bother doing it here in the United States. You'll probably end up starving to death in the gutter or being killed in a school shooting, one or the other.
So yeah, as she sort of alluded to in the beginning, this is what we already knew. but it is nice to have actual peer-reviewed data to support it. What's more of interest to me is not the obvious, what we already knew. It's what does it mean? Well, conservatives have a tendency to turn science into a boogeyman or like a insane version of what it actually is. So all science is essentially a complex analysis of what is true based on verifiable data, based on repeated studies, based on falsifiability. You can't take anything seriously in science if it can't be falsified. This is very, very basic common knowledge. So what happens when you no longer take science seriously? Well, all that's left is intuition, emotional thinking, um, tons of fallacious reasoning. It's why conservatives in general commit so many logical fallacies, because they don't value reason. They don't take science and logic seriously. They've created like conspiracy theories around it. So what you're left with is your feelings. And when you don't use evidence or logic for anything, then you start believing what you take insane things that are easily falsifiable seriously, like flat earth, like QAnon, like, well, QAnon isn't easily uh, disproven, but there's absolutely no evidence for it, and it makes some very grandiose claims. So it's logical to just, without evidence or until any evidence is presented, to assume that it's some crazy fucking conspiracy shit that some person made up. Um, you're left with fucking beliefs that wildfires are created by space lasers. Beliefs that despite all of the evidence that human created and driven climate change is not happening, or even as she said, that it's a positive thing, despite all the evidence. And so what happens is it becomes like a norm to use like bandwagon thinking, like your views aren't your own. It's just whatever like some conservative figure tells you. So you use that sort of logic or your emotions, like you happen to hate immigrants, for example, or black people. So because of those emotions, you create your own reality. And that's what emotional reasoning is. You don't base anything on evidence. So what you do is you'll either take data that does exist and you will use mental gymnastics to like mold it to fit your narrative. To you're taking something that is true, but then you lie about it and add on to it in order to confirm your narrative. You will again, like the obvious, reject every actual scientific endeavor, especially if it uh, goes against your worldview. And that's why, like, for instance, Christianity is so broken today. Because in order to hold at least certain views under Christianity, you kind of need to not live in reality because evidence suggests otherwise. For example, there was never a worldwide flood. Like there's so many different things. If you're like a young Earth creationist, you're retarded, like straight out of the gate. Like the amount of evidence against that is like absolutely mountains. But instead, what they'll do is they'll come up with these conspiracies that like some scientific atheist people decided to make up stuff, which you can't do in science. In science, this is the beauty of science. Like when you like everything hinges on your emotions, you believe stuff regardless of whether it's true or not, right? With science, you literally get points for trying to disprove your own theories. And another, I go over this a lot, but another common misconception: a theory in science is not a hunch. It requires mountains of fucking supporting evidence to even be considered a theory in the first place. So, yeah, what happens is we get these people who are like intellectually neutered. Like they can't think. They're retarded. But they're purposefully retarded. They want to be retarded. And as a result, you can't take them seriously. And again, as she covered, there was various attempts to try to find ways to reach the conservatives, to like get them to accept science, at least in certain areas. And all of it failed, which means they're a lost cause. Stop trying. Like they're retards. Like you have to just accept it for what it is. And even if they're family members or whatever, you have to go, well, they're gone. They're forever gone. I won't be able to reach them. They're special needs kids, even if they're adults. Yeah, and the funny thing is when these sort of things are brought up, conservatives get butthurt and they'll try to do a no you. They'll try to like sort of pull an appeal to hypocrisy and go, well, leftists believe blah, blah, blah. But all of the things that they use are scientifically proven. Like one of the most common ones is that like, well, at least conservatives don't believe that men can turn into women. Ha ha ha. That's like the most common thing. So one, there's not one fucking leftist, liberal, whatever you want to call it, on the planet that I've met personally that believes that men can biologically turn into women. So this is either they're extra retarded, which is possible, or they're just lying to try to like they're desperately trying to defend their own stupidity by pulling a tu quoque and going no you, which is sad. It means they have no argument. So when they pull these things, though, with the example I just used, gender is not sex. This is very basic shit. This is something that we've known for an insane amount of time. Gender is not a new concept. And this is what conservatives want to believe. And this goes back into they reject science. They reject anything that goes against their worldview because they're retarded. So gender is socially defined and has always been socially defined. Always. Ever since the fucking origin of the fucking term. It's what it means. It's essentially, and because it's social, it's not something that is even in the realm of science. It's whatever the fuck you identify is what you are. Socially. You can't defeat that There's no way around it. You can't like show like any sort of science regarding sex to make your point, because it's not sex. This is very common sense shit. This is not like rocket science. It's very simple. So you, yet again, lose on the scientific grounds because you don't understand basic shit. It's hilarious. But anyway, like, it's like they're incapable of seeing it. So, like, all you can really do is not really try to convince them, just fucking laugh at them. Get with your friends that actually have brains and make fun of the retards. It's the best you can really do. You're never going to change their mind. They're too stupid. But yeah, it goes, it's across the board. And it's really sad because it means that like close to half of the population are just sadly beyond reach. I mean, to be fair, like people who are sort of like centrists can still be reached, and I oftentimes try to do that. But your people who have been conservatives for a long period of time don't think logically, that you can't reach them logically, at least for the most part, a vast majority of them. Anyhow, this is more evidence. Although, because they don't accept science, they will claim that this is probably that it's like a study that was funded by like George Soros or some shit, and that it's not even legitimate or something. That's what they always do with science that goes against their own views. It's really funny and sad. But anyhow, I've got to go to work, so thank you for your time.